Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitnie Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon, talking all things leadership. And this week, we're talking about leadership mastery and tools that you need to have in your toolbox. The toolbox. That ever powerful toolbox of things that you can use that will help you to be a better leader and to show up the way you want and to lead in the way that I like to think of it as to help you be the leader that you would follow, right? Or the
Well, yeah.
leader that you would have wanted if you were coming along.
It's interesting. I like to think of it a little differently. I agree with what you're saying, but I like to think of it are things that will help you be more effective, because
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee that some people would not follow a leader that leads the way they do, right? Especially the people that like to yell at people.
No, you're right. You don't. Yes, you would not follow people that lead the way you do, but you want to be the leader that you would follow.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Right.
But
And so and it takes that self-awareness to help you recognize that maybe you aren't the leader that you would follow. And in the end, it's okay. But recognize where you are and then make some shifts, right? Adopt some tools. And we're going to talk about a number of different tools. You don't have to adopt all of them all at once. Look and see which ones you need to would be helpful for you to be more effective, and take one, master it, and then add another one, and then add another one. So any other opening thoughts as we get started here?
no, I really like this topic because, as you know, and we went to school together. So I'm a leadership geek, and I just when we started learning about all the different leadership theories and practice, I really dug into that and was like, I gotta get in here and put my whole face in that bowl.
So why don't we start with situational leadership, unless you want to start somewhere else.
No, absolutely. This is a good one. And
Okay.
when I was thinking about today's topics, and you shared with me earlier, that, what about situational leadership? I remember when we were studying this, and I thought, I don't like this very much. But situational leadership has become my go-to for especially new leaders who are struggling to figure out how to manage the different people, the different types of people, or I should say, how to lead the different people on their team. And so situational leadership is really about, as a leader, changing your style based on the competence and commitment of the people that are on your team. Not everybody is going to have the same level of competence. Not
Yeah.
everybody is going to have the same level of commitment. So you need to have a different approach based on those two factors.
I think of this as the really, and I think I've said this before, right? When we think about leadership, instead of thinking about it as something that's out there, it really is in here, right? It really is about who you are as a person, how you interact with other people, how you relate to people. And if we could spend more of our energy thinking about our individual relationships with other people, some of the things that we talk about would naturally flow from that. And I see situational leadership doing exactly that. The way I interact with you is not the same way that I interact with my husband. It's not the same way that I interact with my sister, right? And so if you and I are working together, the way I would lead would not be the same with you as with other people. And I think what happens is we get this as part of our identity. This is who I am. This is how I communicate. This is how I lead. This is how I relate to people, because this is who I am and I'm not going to change, or I can't change. And instead of adopting that approach, recognize that in reality, you do change, right? You do adapt and adopt a different style and approach for different people. And it's okay. That isn't to say that you're not at your core the same, but the methods that you use, the maybe the vocabulary that you use, the way you just relate to people shifts, morphs a little bit, so that you can get the best from that person in that relationship, whatever that relationship is. And in the same way that the way I would lead at work might not be the same way that I lead at home. And so really thinking about and I would say taking a step back and look at how you show up in different situations, hence situational leadership, right? Looking at how you do that, see if there are some additional modifications that you could use with different people on your team, like you said, to adapt to what their competence level is, what their commitment level is, and if there's something else that you could be doing that would help them to improve their competence and or improve their commitment to the team and the goals that you're pursuing.
Right. And I think what's very interesting about this, and I don't know if I got this from the leadership book that we studied in school, or because I've done additional work as you have too, but there are the beauty of situational leadership is, if you're looking at it for those theory nerds out there like myself, it's D1 S1, right? So D1 is, the development style of the person, and the S is the style. So as a leader, you use the S portion. The D is for the person on your team, the developmental person on your team. So, but when I was studying this, I found that they gave these 4 categories, really interesting names that talked about what they actually are and how you can approach it. So the first one is the enthusiastic beginner. That's the D1. That's the person with very low competence, but very high commitment. You may have a new person coming into your team. They have a lot of energy and they really want to do well for your organization, for your department. And so they want to learn as many things as they can, but they don't know anything. So with them, you take a directing style. You want to actually give them lots of supervision. You don't want to micromanage them, but you want to give them lots of supervision. You want to give them ideas. You want to give them suggestions so they can and follow through. So they can follow and learn as they go. So that you're starting to build their competence so it matches their commitment. So that's the first one. The second one is it's the disillusioned learner. So they have low to middling competence and very low commitment. I thought it was very interesting when I was in it. It's like, why not start with this person? Well, this person usually were on the path to learning and being very good, but maybe something happened that set them back. And so they lost a lot of confidence. So here, what you want to do is you want to take what's called the coaching style, and you want to give them some direction, but also lots of support, so they start building up their confidence to do the job. And so that's the D2. The D3, and I always think of basketball when I say these things, the D3, Division 3. because it's March, so I have basketball in my brain. That's a capable but cautious. This person has very high competence. They're capable, but they have low to variable commitment. They don't have a whole lot of confidence. So here you want to be supportive. You want to cater to their emotions. You want to validate their emotions, boost them up, give them the attaboys, so to speak, so they can move forward. And then the D4 is the self-reliant achiever. These people are high competence, they're high commitment. These are the people that you take the delegating style to. You delegate to them. These are the people that are going to be your leaders of the future. You don't have to give them a whole lot. You just give them a task to do, let them know how they're doing, and reward them appropriately.
Yeah, I love that there's such a framework around this, and that it is not just like, here, go, and that there's a framework. And thank you for explaining that. I think what's really important to keep in mind is that flexibility is a huge part of this, right? Remembering that no one size fits all approach is going to work, that this is a model, a leadership framework that is grounded in growth and development of team members. And it's something that we're really huge on here on the State of Leadership, which makes it, and I hear you saying this was an evolution on your part, but that makes it difficult for me to really appreciate that there was a time that you did not really sort of dig this style.
Well, it did. I was like, man, this is easy. Right? Like this isn't busting my brain. But when I read things like full range leadership model, that really, as you know, I'm really big on that one, and transformational leadership. And there's got to be 50 or 60 other frameworks and models out there. But that one, I remember reading that and I was like, yeah. But as I've looked at it, worked with it, used it with my clients, and of course, before I show things to my clients, I use them myself.
Yeah.
And I was like, I remember somebody talking about how much they liked the framework. I said, well, let me go back and take a look at it. And then as I started looking at it, I realized that this is fantastic, especially for new leaders who are struggling and they don't know how to approach their team. This gives them a framework to use. And some of the other leadership frameworks are a little more complex. This one is very easy to understand, almost prescriptive.
And the other things that are really benefits, I think of this, and not that they're not in other methods, but that there's improved communication, right? And that by adjusting your style, you are able to communicate more effectively with your team, ensuring that the guidance and support and feedback that they're getting is appropriate to each member's stage in development, and everyone is moving at their own pace. And one of the challenges that I have seen in organizations is where, particularly out of training or out of coaching, there's the shoulds come in, that someone should be at a particular place, have a certain level of competency, and comparing it to someone else, and that can create a situation where you have people that are it can impact their confidence and their ability to actually grow as quickly as they could have, because they're being compared to where someone else is. And so this allows your communication to adapt and be what someone needs. And then ultimately, the bottom line goal is to have enhanced team performance.
Absolutely.
right? And so what we want are increased levels of motivation, better performance, and greater satisfaction in their job, in their contribution, etc.
Absolutely.
So the next one we're going to talk about is communication. Let's talk about, just since we were just there on communication, improving communication, especially around difficult conversations, right, is vital for effective leadership. And I think there is all too often we're trying to avoid conflict, we're trying to avoid those uncomfortable situations, and so either those conversations are put off or they are magnified in such a way that when they finally come around, that we don't really, how do I want to say this? That we're so wrapped up in what could have been that we're not present with how a conversation is actually unfolding. And the unfortunate side of that is that makes it difficult for learning and growth to happen, right? Because we're not present with what is. And so, what are your thoughts about developing communication in a way that helps with these difficult conversations?
First of all, I think that with any skill, you only get better if you practice it. And of course, you're not going to be seeking out difficult conversations to have. But
Well, I
unless
don't know.
unless you got a problem, but most people don't do that. In fact, most people
Right.
avoid difficult conversations. But the key here is two things. A, get a book. There's actually a book called Difficult Conversations. Like, get the book. Get the book. Crucial Conversations is another book about having those conversations that we sometimes avoid. So get some kind of resource. And then the second part of that is you have to move toward those things when they happen. Most of the time, I will tell you, when I'm coaching leaders around difficult conversations, when we work on that in coaching sessions, they create their own framework. And then I say, you know what's interesting about this? I asked you the question, what could you do in this situation? And you immediately came up with something. What's held you back from doing it? It's the avoidance factor that keeps people from actually being good in difficult conversations. Maybe they had one before, a difficult conversation with somebody, and it didn't go well. And that usually is because they approach it with, I know how this person's going to respond. And then when they don't do that, when a person doesn't respond the way they thought they were, they force it. The other person makes it happen because it's comfortable to them. So, practicing that, don't run away from difficult conversations. Don't wait until a small problem becomes really big, is what a lot of people do. They see, especially leaders, right? New leaders see something, an employee doing something that they don't like. They don't say anything. And this is going to sound crazy. I had a boss that actually was having a conversation with somebody, came out of the room, came to me and said, can you go in there and tell them that they're dressed inappropriately? I kid you not. They were just having the conversation with in the same room, and then came out, took a break and said, oh, can you go and talk to them about how they're dressed? And I said, well, I'll do that. I said, why didn't you do it? Did not want to have the difficult conversation with that person. So I'm sure he could have done it because he had no problem telling me the things that he didn't like about how I operated. But did not want to do this with the person that he didn't have a relationship with.
Something that you said occurred to me, and that was about practicing and rehearsing. And so preparing and planning what it is you're going to say, and not and not in a way that is about you predicting not predicting even so much, but assuming how someone is going to behave and respond. But I suggest that in your preparation, sort of thinking about what it is you want to say, you start with how do you want the conversation to unfold, right? What is the outcome that you want at the end? What is being really clear about the objective? And so you can have some anticipation about how that person might react, but you don't want to make assumptions and assumptions to the point where it increases the any anxiety that you may have around having the conversation or getting it started, right? But thinking about how they might react and what questions they might have, or what sort of feedback, and I'm going to say feedback, that you could get, that you could then try to have answers for. And so to think through them. And what this reminds me of is when I used to work for other people in capacities different than how I work for people now, right? Is that, someone would have an assumption that I was going to react in a particular way, and I'll own, it's not like I've always been perfect at how I interacted or communicated with people. So I'm not going to say someone might not have had reason to be concerned about how they thought I might respond to something. But, if you are assuming that people are going to, be difficult, right? To exacerbate or exaggerate in the situation, it likely makes it so that you now are on the defensive. And so then there's an antagonistic sort of attitude and approach to what's being said. And so you want to be really careful about the assumptions piece, but you want to think about the kinds of things that people might be concerned about, what their reactions are, what their questions may be, and be prepared to answer those in advance. Some really practical tips would be, and I don't know if you have, when you're working with your clients, if you guys rehearse together, right? So these are things that I have done with clients where I will do some role playing. Yep. And give them the opportunity to actually feel like they are in that situation, to use their words. And some of what you want to do is make sure that you're using what we call I statements, right? Rather than you statements. You're not being accusatory, because when you talk about when you say let's say you always miss deadlines, right? Rather than saying, I feel concerned when deadlines are missed. When you use that to put it in the second person, it sounds accusatory. And what you get back from people is defensiveness. And so you want to think about the words that you're choosing to use in those situations. You want to be direct, but certainly empathetic at the same time, right? You want to clearly communicate what it is you're trying to say without beating around the bush, to make sure that the other person knows that you are acknowledging how they feel, which I think is probably if I have a communication lesson that I have learned, is that listening, right, and giving people the opportunity to express themselves and to be heard is probably, and there are lots of communication lessons that I've learned, but I really think that, and I come from a place of, as a lawyer and a lobbyist, as someone who is often negotiating language or outcomes. And when people feel heard, they are more likely to let their guards down, and you can get to a place where you can move forward, um, to finding solutions and moving things forward. And so be direct, be empathetic, be a good listener, an active listener, and just give people the opportunity to express what it is they're feeling, or what it is they're thinking, or what it is they want. And then the last thing I would say in this area of communication is to make sure that when you're having these difficult conversations, that you are focused on behaviors and events, and not the person's personal attributes or their personality. Again, if you go down that path, you create opportunities, additional opportunities, I would say, for people to feel put upon, and then their response is, or their reaction is, to be defensive. And once people are defensive, they are no longer listening, right? You probably get some closed off body language, or glazed over eyes. They're not paying attention, they're not listening, and then you're not going to be able to get to a solution that is acceptable for both sides.
Absolutely.
So the next one we're going to tackle is delegation, the skill of delegation.
I thought we were going to do emotional intelligence. I think
emotional intelligence. There you go, emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Which is interesting, because emotional intelligence is probably the key factor in success on the job, getting promotions, doing well. And a lot of times people mistake that. They wonder why I have the most skill. But this person got promoted and I didn't. It's not always the person. We say that a lot of times that's the only criteria, but certain companies or certain leaders, they don't just look at skill, they look at someone's emotional intelligence and those factors, or how they interact with other people, as to the reasons why they want to move that person up, or give them the choice role, or make them the lead in a project, or etc.
Do you think that's a conscious understanding of that, or that it is sort of more an inherent, there's something missing, or
I don't think it's conscious at all. I think when people are most emotionally intelligent, we feel better when we interact with them. We understand, or we feel like you were saying, we feel heard, because they have those key elements. And we talk about this a lot on the show. The key elements are, self-awareness. They are aware of self. They understand what triggers them. They understand when their body language is maybe not as effective or not as positive as it should be. And then they have self-management. They control their emotions. We like to be around people who can control their emotions.
Yes.
Right. It doesn't matter if this person has great skill. If they are a hothead and fly off the handle the first time they make a mistake, or the first time somebody points out that, hey, their work wasn't up to par, they're not going to get they probably won't get the promotion. They will in some cases, but probably not. So self-management, emotional self-control is another element to EQ or emotional intelligence. Also, emotional self-expression, expressing your emotions, letting people know what's going on inside you. People like to know that. People don't like to guess. If I hate it when I say something and I'm trying to figure out if it landed the way I thought it landed.
Mm-hmm.
It's those people that have that emotional expression, they're easier to talk to because other people know where they stand with those folks. And then you have social awareness, which is the part that really helps them. They can recognize the emotions of other people. They can see what's going on with other people, and they can validate those emotions, which are skills that we learn in coaching school. And then the last part of that is relationship management, is building those strong relationships with people, whether it's in a personal setting or on the job. And that's key when you're networking. You need to bring your emotional intelligence to the forefront when you're networking with people. And it's those 4 components that will make you very successful.
Very true. Very true. I don't think I have anything to add. You covered that very well. So
Thank you.
And so then that brings us to the next skill or tool is delegation, right? And if you're going to lead effectively, you need to be able to help people manage their workloads more efficiently, right? This is also a key for helping you to develop team members and to enhance productivity and morale. And I think that last piece, we think of delegation, often the person who's delegating is wary of delegating things if they think they could do it better themselves, and therefore it's going to take more time. I think this is one of those areas where, particularly when I am coaching new leaders, right, and entrepreneurs, and it's like, well, I could, there's a sense of overwhelm and there's so much to do, and I'm asking, well, how are you delegating? And they're not delegating, which is causing the overwhelm, because they're trying to do everything because it will be easier and less time consuming than to pass it along. And I think, in a one-off, that might be true. But if you've got anything, and this is outside of people doing the work that is necessarily within the scope of their job responsibilities, right? So these are additional things, or and I try to get my leaders and entrepreneurs to think about what only they can do, right? And to really want to move to a place where the things that are on your plate are those things that only you can do, and that you are then delegating everything else. And there's a challenge there, again, because they think it's just easier and more effective and efficient if they simply do it themselves.
Yeah, I find that is definitely a factor. The other factor is that the people that do delegate stop doing it because they've delegated a task and it didn't come out the way they wanted it to. So then they go, well, I have to do it myself. But I always ask those people, did you check in to see how that person was doing that task? 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. They think that delegating is just giving it to somebody. And then when the completion date comes, that person gives you a fully formed product or project, and you're like, okay, but you have to check in to make sure that it's trending in the right direction and make adjustments so that person is learning and that you can be sure that the end product will be what you expect it to be and what you wanted it to be.
And the other thing is that the benefit doesn't just inure to the leader, right? There are huge benefits for team members, the empowerment of team members and helping them to foster a sense of ownership and in accountability. And so when I'm saying accountability, I'm not talking about setting people up for discipline. We're talking about ownership and taking responsibility. And the more that people have a sense of ownership of what they're doing, the more likely they are, right, to do a good job with what's been delegated to them. And so this isn't about micromanaging. It is about it, and as you said, using your tools, right? The prior tools that we've talked about of emotional intelligence and communication, making sure that you have outlined not just this is what needs to be done, but to talk about the expectations of that, the quality, right, the timeliness of what it is, and then making sure that people have the tools and the resources that they need to get it. It doesn't do any good to delegate and then to either be so hands off that someone can't get from you what they need in order to make sure that they've done it, that they don't have the authority, right, to actually do it. So if they need help from someone else or a resource from outside of you, that the other people know that this is the person who's in charge, right? So it does take some forethought, and it takes some energy, but in the end, it is a benefit for both you as a leader and your team members that you're delegating things to.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the best things about delegating that work is when you, and this really feeds into the situational leadership aspect we were talking about at the top of the show. When you're doing that, that person that you're giving that work to is learning. They're learning how to, whatever skill or task you're putting before them, they're learning that. They're learning more about you. They're learning more, hopefully, about the organization. And you, of course, as the leader, should be positioning that person to be a leader in their own right, either for succession planning or maybe that person has a intrinsic need or want to be a leader. And you're setting that person up. You're honoring their values, which is something that we talk about a lot on this show.
And so delegation leads into the next one, which is project management, right? And the having this as a skill or a piece of your toolkit. What do you say about project management?
Well, we're
basic principles.
Yeah, basic principles is knowing how tasks and parts of projects interconnect with each other. So and being able to put that on a timeline and delegate that work or assign that work to people so you can track it and know where that final product is going to end or project is going to end.
Yeah.
So, because a lot of times with these projects, the horizon for them, the time horizon could be a couple of months. And if that leader is putting people in charge of that, or if that leader is in charge of that, they're ultimately accountable for the entire project. And in the meantime, they need to be giving project updates to somebody that's over them. So having those basic processes in place, knowing where the milestones are, being able to track those milestones, knowing the interdependencies, knowing that you have to get this before you can do this task, and tracking that, and that's very, very, very important. And a lot of managers, they don't really have those skills. Again, the beauty of today's all 6 of these topics, there are resources out there that you can get. And and we've talked about this a couple of months ago on one of the episodes. And I'm astonished at how many leaders will get a promotion and then not do anything to educate themselves. You can spend, $16 on a book, or do what I do, go to thrift books and get it, at a discount, and it will help you tremendously in your job. But they get it, they'll get a promotion and just use their title, their position power to do everything, and wonder why they're having a hard time, or in some cases even flat out failing.
Wow.
It's really interesting to me. It's part of, I think, part of our culture. We have that I can do it all myself kind of attitude. I don't need to ask anybody. And if I use a resource, that means it doesn't come from me. And leadership is I don't really believe that. I'm a natural born leader. No, you're not. Go out and get some skills so you can, it's funny. People aren't born going, hey, you do this. Hey, you do that. They learn those things through experiences when they're little, and then some of those things do translate. But you need to broaden that, because what you learned when you were the little league captain won't sustain you when you're running an organization or you're the head of a division. Some of those things might translate, but there are a lot of other skills you need in order to be a successful leader.
What's really, I think, important to understand as it relates to the basics of project management is how all the other things that we've talked about fit into this, right? So the communication, talking about having clear, definable, achievable goals and objectives that are clearly communicated, right? Making sure that there is adequate resource allocation of time, money, personnel, that in order to maximize productivity and to prevent bottlenecks and to make sure people are growing, that you've got to make sure that they have what they need in order to do the job. It doesn't serve you, your team members, your organization, to have demands or expectations and then not give people the tools or resources, and in the communicating with them the strategies that they need in order to accomplish what they've been asked to do, right? And then using the components of delegation and accountability to make sure that they're on task, on time, not in a micromanaging way, but checking in with milestones, right? Particularly when people are doing things for the first time or early in their growth. And so taking the time to be in touch, it is really important.
I just want to add one thing to what you said, because what you said is 100% true. But also, I want to add, when it's a long-range project, you need to have a process that's going to remind you to check in on those milestones, because that's where a lot of things get lost, because it's not part of your normal work cadence, because it's over a longer horizon. So sometimes we forget that, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be spearheading a committee about this thing, but having a process that and it kills me because we have calendars, we have phones, and all these different things, and we use them to play games, right?
Right. No, absolutely, right. And there are tons of tools that can be used, and processes and frameworks that can be used for different kinds of projects that need to get completed. We don't, I'm not advocating for anything in particular. You have to figure out what works for you and your team, but right, recognizing that the tools are out there, Trello, Microsoft Project, Asana, there are all kinds of tools and resources, agile, scrum methodologies, and the like, right? So figuring out what makes sense for the project or the work that you're doing, the members on your team, being open and listening to them about what they're using. This is probably particularly helpful if you've got some disparity in generations doing work, right? So your younger generations, your younger workers are probably using more app-based but project management tools than maybe your more mature workers. Right. I was talking with someone recently, and they were saying that one of their employees came to them and asked if they could use a particular tool. And she's like, "Can't we just email?" Right? Can we just do this by email or do it by text? And they were like, "No, we want to use, XYZ." And so I was sort of in the middle. I was like, what was wrong with Slack? Right? I just sort of mastered that one, and now they're on to something else. And so, all right, but being open to that, and and making sure that you avail yourself. So it's not just your workers, your employees who are growing. You are continuing to grow as well. And so being adaptable, learning new tools and resources in order to be more efficient and effective. And I would say that we're not talking about changing for the sake of changing, but if it's going to help your team overall, be open and flexible about what you're using to get things done.
Absolutely.
And then the last one we want to cover today, a tool that is effective for you, is decision making, right? Your decision making frameworks, having a systematic process that helps you make informed strategic choices. And you want to have frameworks that allow you to streamline your decision making process, taking out biases, reducing biases anyway, if not eliminating them to the best of your ability, so that you can free up your energy, the bandwidth to actually get the work done. And I think not enough to this. Maybe I don't want to say energy because I don't want to use energy twice. But you want to free up, sort of your decision making processes. And we did I think a 2-part series on decision making.
Yep.
And actually we've done more than 2 episodes, but we did a 2-parter, and then we did another one where we talked about the book decisions. And so the importance of freeing yourself, having a process that allows you to free yourself from the thousands, the tens of thousands of decisions and choices that we're faced with on a daily basis, right? Some of the things that we do on autopilot are helpful. You want to look at making sure that the things that you're doing by habit or on autopilot, that it continues to make sense to do it that way. And some of why we have the habits that we have and the way we do the things that we do is because it does free us up for more important things. But you want to make sure, you want to occasionally, right, evaluate or reevaluate to make sure that still makes sense. And in the end, I'm not going to advocate for, Robert might, I'm not going to advocate here for any particular decision-making process. You've got to find one that works for you in the end. And again, I would say go back and listen to or watch the episodes that we've done on decision making, there are some frameworks and some real helpful hints on and tips for you on making decisions and tools that you can use.
Yeah, we also did, in addition to that, we also talked about making decisions in complex situations. So we did the whole episode, and we talked
complexity,
complexity, right? And we introduced 2 decision-making frameworks, and we also talked about the book that one of them came from. So you had the Knevin framework, and then we had the complexity canvas. Those are decision-making frameworks too, but when those situations, you're dealing with situations that are complex, interdependencies, all kinds of unknowns in there. So check them out. If you have reviewed those episodes or you remember them, you know that I have a preference, and I'm going to do what Whitnie just did and not tell you what it is. Go and look at the episode. But I never shy away from complex situations because now I have a framework that allows me to do that.
I think in the end, the bottom line is whatever framework you use, that you have one, right? I think the key here is that you have one, and that or multiple ones, right? You may need a different framework for different situations, and be okay with that. And we can all learn to be better decision makers. Right. It doesn't have to be that. And I was talking with a client just earlier this week about some decisions that have been made. And we were focused on the lessons learned from that. One of the lessons that she mentioned that she learned is that she doesn't have to be afraid of taking time to gather information to make decisions, right? And so she doesn't have to rush to make them, and then she doesn't have to procrastinate so long to make a decision. And ultimately, there's a sweet spot in there. But here's the thing: that sweet spot may shift for different situations. Right? Some situations may require you to make a relatively snap decision. It needs to be done immediately. Other things, it's like, no, I can take my time and really think things through. And what you need to understand is as much about yourself and your decision making, how you do it, what you need, as well as understanding different situations and what they need. And so a lot of that comes with time and making decisions, making more and more decisions, and being willing to make the wrong decision, right? Which is what holds up a lot of people. They don't want to make the wrong decision, and therefore, right, they don't. And not is making a decision as well.
Absolutely. I couldn't say it any better than that.
So with that, darn, the hour just flies by.
It does.
This hour flew by. And so, you know what that means. We're at the end of our time together. And so, you have a closing thought as we wrap this up today?
My closing thought is, as a leader, you can't be on autopilot. If you're on autopilot, you're probably not doing it right. You have to be engaged and looking at situations and looking at the best approach for that situation.
I love it. And so I want to leave you with this. Hopefully, what we have done for you today has provided you with some valuable insights and some practical strategies that can be used to enhance your toolkit, your toolbox, and to remember that being a leader is an ever continuing journey. right? This is not I'm a leader and I've arrived. This is you continuously learning and growing and uh, adapting and adopting tools and strategies and bringing resources in, right? And I think about, literal toolkits, toolboxes, right? There are pieces that are coming in and coming out, and you're using different ones to accomplish different things. And just being willing to do that is going to help you on your leadership journey. So, with that, we want to thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. Robert, if someone wanted to work with you, how would they go about doing that?
And you can reach me at inspire me at roberthilliardcoaching.com, or you can just go to my website, which is Robert Hilliard Coaching, and fill out the communication form there and reach out to me. Let me know the goals you have for yourself and whatever challenges you're facing. And let's set up a discovery session so we can start talking about how we can work together.
Awesome. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do so at shiftingintoaction.now.site, shiftingintoaction.now.site. You can let me know there if you would like a discovery call, or you can pick up a couple of different tools there. There are some ebooks there. My gift to you, avail yourself of them. And so if you've got any additional leadership tools that you think are important for leaders to have, we would welcome your insight. Drop them in the comments, and we can discuss them there in the comments, or we could do some additional episodes that address other tools that are necessary for you to be the effective leader that you would even follow. So with that, Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. And until next time, take care.
Bye now.